Okay. Improving the representation of women in higher education in the UK experience. I'd like to welcome Ms. Pugh.
Salam, good morning everyone. I'm sorry I don't speak Arabic, so I'll be delivering my presentation in English. First of all, I'd like to thank very much both Brunel and Ahliauniversitybh for inviting me here today to share the UK experiences of increasing the representation of women in higher education. Before I proceed, I've had a lot of questions already about the name of the organisation I'm from, Advance HE. Okay. So we're actually established in March of this year, and we are formed following a merger of the Equality Challenge Unit, of which I'm a former employee, the Higher Education Academy, which I understand many of you have had interactions with formally, and the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education. The merger has brought together expertise in one agency, which we're very excited about, in relation to leadership and management, teaching and learning, equality and diversity, and governance. So we're very much hoping to have a wealthier experience to bring to higher education institutions globally. Okay. So what do we do? Well, we're very much an organisation that is formed of the higher education sector, working specifically for it, and that makes us pretty unique. We understand that there aren't many countries that have agents specifically working on these issues for the higher education sector with unique understanding into employment, academics, students. And our purpose is to advance the professional practice of higher education to improve outcomes for the benefit of students, staff, and society as a whole, recognising the importance that higher education plays in our society, in our economic development. We're independent of government. We are not-for-profit, and we are a registered charity with an objective to support strategic change and continuous improvement through the development of individuals and organisations of higher education. I say we're of and for the sector because we're a membership-based organisation currently working with over 350 higher education institutions globally. We are working in the Gulf region. In Bahrain, we're working with the University of Bahrain, the Ministry of Education, the Royal University for Women, and Applied Sciences University. We're also working in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar at the moment. So we have 15 years experience of working in more than 50 countries globally. If you're interested in learning more about the specific work we're doing in each country, do let me know, and I can ensure that I let you know through communication with my colleagues or further information that I have today. Okay. So how are we delivering that mission? We're very much working and supporting the sector, the higher education sectors nationally and globally, as well as with individual institutions and individual staff members and students, to recognise and improve teaching quality. Many of you, I hope, would have heard of the Higher Education Academy Fellowships, and I have a leaflet outside about that if anyone's interested. To implement good governance in the sector, what it means to have a well-functioning governing body, very much to recognise the importance of and encourage reflection on equality, diversity, and inclusion. I might refer to it as EDI, so if I say something that's an acronym that people aren't sure of, please raise your hand and I'll remember to spell it out. How we can establish strong leadership in the sector. The higher education sector is very much changing, specifically in the UK, but from one that was based on how to get good research out there to one that is very much focused on students. How can we improve the student experience? How can we encourage students to remain with us and also to stay on to become our excellent academics? And related to that is to help the sector establish a good reputation that it can develop and retain. We want to have a good reputation from students that have come from countries such as Bahrain that we are a good sector in the UK, but also we recognise that is important. We are a global sector and everyone is wanting to compete to attract students. Okay. Regulation, that's been quite key in the UK. We've recently had the establishment of the Office for Students, but we also recognise that countries globally have regulation that impacts on what is required of the education sector in terms related to the economy, but also what do we need our future students to be able to deliver for us, and how can we support the sector in delivering that regulation and promise. Also, though, to self-assess one another and to critique ourselves. We encourage critique in academia, and yet often within an institution we don't want to critique our work ourselves in terms of how it is run, the leadership, the governance, and often to be ahead of the field, to keep ahead of the game, we need to be critically analysing what we're doing. So I've mentioned that we work with universities, within that faculty and leadership programs. We've undertaken governance reviews, accrediting staff development, but also recognising equality and diversity through our charters, the Athena Swan Charter, which I'm going to talk more about today, and we also have a Race Equality Charter, which at present is specific to the UK, the Race Equality Charter, due to our context. We're working with governments and ministries to bring about sustainable and transformative change, and also individuals. Now, in our work with individuals, we don't provide them with individual advice if they have a problem. We will run programs for them, and we will provide advice to universities on situations that they might have with individual staff and students from an equalities perspective. And I've already mentioned the Higher Education Academy and coaching that we run. Okay. So that's about us, and I will now move on to the presentation. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me throughout the conference. I'm very much looking forward to the next 2 days. Okay. So what are the challenges that we are facing in the UK? I hope everyone can see this slide. There are some figures at the bottom, so do stand up if you need to, and apologies for the height. What we have is what we term a pipeline. A common phrase is the leaky pipeline. We actually have more students than men studying at undergraduate level. We have 55.7% female students, which is fantastic. We're very pleased at that, particularly given it wasn't that long ago that women weren't allowed to study in higher education and gain degrees. Moving on, looking at the research postgraduate level, though, you start to see a change of 48.3% women and 51.7% men. So the balance is beginning to turn. Academic staff, you then start to see a big change, with men at 54.3% and women now below 50% at 45.7%. So why are our female undergraduates not progressing at the same rate of entry into research postgraduates and academic staffing? Our real concern comes in at professorial level, where we have just 24.6% professors. That is quite surprising given the number of students we have going through, and we are working to ensure that we get more female professors. And following some of the initiatives we've introduced, in 2013 we had 14% of vice-chancellors were women, and as of December 2017, we have 26% of our vice-chancellors as women. So what we are seeing is, as people get more senior in their careers, we have fewer women, and we want to know why. Okay. The other issue that we have, and I'm very interested to learn from Bahrain here, is a significant underrepresentation on particular course types. This is science subjects by subject area. You'll see that whilst we have this wonderful percentage figure of 54.7% women, where are they actually studying, and what subjects are they studying, and what implications does this have for our economic development? So if you look at veterinary science, the proportion of women is actually, it's for so my maths. So it's, you can tell I didn't study maths at university. It's over 70% women on veterinary science courses. And also subjects applied to medicine. But then you look at biological sciences, agricultural and related subjects, there are more men than women. Areas like nursing, sorry, this is UK specific stats. All of these stats are from the UK. And I'll talk more. I'm afraid I don't have one specific to the Gulf region, but I understand that you actually have been collecting data, which is fantastic, and it's been one of the key things that we've found in helping bring about change, is understanding where women are, and also where men are. People might say, why are you concerned if you have more women or more men on a course? We're looking at our economy in the longer term. And if you look at veterinary science, I have farmers saying to me, we are worried that we don't have enough men going into veterinary science because it has an impact further down the line about what areas they are practicing in. They're less likely to want to women are apparently less likely want to go into work with heavy animals on farms, which is surprising given that men are more likely to undertake agricultural and related subjects. We have similar patterns in the arts and humanities subject areas as well, with very few men represented on modern foreign language courses, and an over-representation of men and not enough women in subjects like politics, philosophy, and so forth. So we want to understand more and work with universities to ensure that their recruitment of students is right from the start. And in Scotland, they're introducing gender targets for courses now to try to address this, whereby there can be no more than 75% representation of one gender on any specific course. Okay. So the other thing that we're aware of is different outcomes in degrees. Whereby women are getting better degrees than men. This is fantastic. We're really, really pleased. But then how are we supporting men in higher education? Why is there a difference in attainment? Is it course specific? Are we ensuring that men engage sufficiently with student services? But also, where there are differences, what does it say to us about student experiences? And we want to ensure that we get it right for everyone. And that's not to say that we can't do more for women, but we need to ensure that we're doing things that benefit all. Mary mentioned the gender pay gap, and it is indeed a key issue in our sector. One of the causes is the underrepresentation of women in senior levels and professorships, and at Vice-Chancellor level. We do, however, have a large proportion of females working in managerial positions in universities. But what this pay gap means, it's actually, the UK has the largest pay gap in Europe of 18%. So the higher education sector, with a mean pay gap of 17.2%, is actually doing better than the UK economy as a whole. But what it's saying is that there are problems in our systems. There can be discrimination in terms of how we determine pay, the policies and practices that we have in place. Men are more likely to negotiate starting salaries than women, so we don't necessarily have structures in place to prevent that negotiation or ensure where it does take place there are rules to cap it. We don't have enough part-time senior level positions. I myself, from my own experiences, I'm lucky. Advanced HE are letting me work 3 days a week. I have 2 young children at home, but I can work 3 days a week so that I can spend time with my family and developing my family, as well as working with the sector, which is something I've been doing before my family and very much enjoy and want to keep doing. So it's a case of where are those senior positions, and we have some fantastic initiatives at the University of Reading where they have job shares, so people sharing roles at very senior positions. Yes, Your Honour. Yeah. Yes. That's a really interesting question. Yep, we're talking about people with the same level of experience, the same qualifications. There's actually research into ethnicity and gender, and the higher qualifications people can have, the pay gap can actually get bigger. So it's not necessarily about your ability to work, your experience to do the job. It's actually about structures that we have, whether that be in pay or society as a whole. Those societal structures are about how we value jobs that women have typically conducted in our workplace. So in the nursing profession in our country, nurses are predominantly women. Teachers are predominantly women. And in those jobs, we don't value them as much as others. So for instance, if you look at the sciences, engineers will be paid more than teachers and so forth. And we've historically attracted men into science subjects rather than women. Yeah. Yes, potentially, but depending if the male engineer has had a chance to negotiate his pay and the woman wasn't aware that that was the culture, that that happened, that it's okay to question the starting salary you're offered. But also there can be a conscious decision by some people to pay men more than others.
There are 2 kinds of pay gaps.
Yeah.
He asked about it, that the same position, same certification, they have different payment because women take less by law.
Yeah.
And the other kind of pay gap is that because the women are in low positions, their income is less than the men.
Yeah.
So which one you mean?
It's both. It's both. You have a pay gap for you. There are 2 causes of the pay gap, and we call it occupational segregation. And we have vertical, which is the position of women in an organization. And then we have horizontal, which is women's position in society, the socialization that's taken place probably from in the womb in terms of what a woman should be doing in terms of their career. And then on top of that, so those are the 2 causes of the pay gap. The third cause is the pay discrimination, that the attitudes. Yes, please.
If you look at the public sectors, okay, because this is very interesting to make a comparative, assessment between what we have here versus what's in the UK. If you look at the public sectors and you take, for example, a profession like clinical nurse, or you take, for example, a teacher. So you're looking at the same professional codes. Does your system in the UK, within the public sectors, for the salary scales, you have gender-based or one?
So gender-based or?
Is it, for example, in the public sector, does the salary scale for women for the same profession is the same as for male?
Yes. Yeah. So we have one.
So where is so in this phenomena is basically the difference in the pay does not exist in the public sector, right?
It does. And in
Where
fact,
is it?
The government, as of this year, it was the first year, introduced a public sector pay gap reporting duty, where it said you have to publish this information on the pay gap using this method of calculation. And it was the first time. It was the first time it was done. It applied to any employer, public or private employers, if they employed more than 250 people. It's really opened the floodgates as to why these gaps are occurring. One university called me, they had a 45% pay gap. So the causes of it are myriad, that there are a number of causes. One element is the pay policy and practice in the pay scales not being applied appropriately. In the HE sector, we're doing better because we have something called the Joint Negotiating Committee for Higher Education Staff, where we have an agreed pay spine within the sector. And both men and women are mapped against that pay spine. I'm really happy to talk to you more about this and to share, I can share some of the literature that we have in the UK. Yes, of course.
Would similar pay gaps exist on ethnicity also?
Yes, and that's something the government's just consulting to do, is to introduce pay gap reporting on, we use the term race in the UK, it covers ethnicity as well. And the government has just consulting on that's the introduction to cover race as well as gender. And in fact, there was a lot of upset that it didn't cover race as well as gender in the UK when it was introduced. There are also calls for it to cover disability too. We're certainly, where we have data and we have good data on disability, race, and gender, we should be exploring our pay practices. Okay. And in fact, I'm pleased you asked that question, because the next slide highlights this. We have significant issues in relation to race in higher education. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission in our country has said that it wants to carry out an investigation into racism in higher education. People can ask why. If we have a look at the figures of professors, again, this is from UK national staff. International staff and students we look at differently. They have a different experience. It's often UK national. It's Mary's. Sorry, the term BME is Black and Minority Ethnic Staff of, and here it is UK origin. So we're particularly concerned when I mentioned the number of female professors being 23.1%, which it's low comparison to men. But you look at black and minority ethnic women, and they're only 1.9% BME women professors. So it's something that we really are trying to improve. We're conscious that London has a black and minority ethnic community of 41%, and by 2050, the UK population overall is expected to be between 25 and 30% black and minority ethnic, as many people are questioning us using the term minority, because certainly numbers of groups are no longer minorities in our communities. And what this data also shows, as has been asked, is it's not just about looking at women as a whole, but often looking at the experiences of different groups of women in our society. So what are the experiences of black and minority women? What are the experiences of disabled women, and so forth? So how can we not just talk about women as a homogenous group or men as a homogenous group, but recognize that we all have different identities, we all have different backgrounds depending on where we studied at university to where we live within the UK. So there are a range of different identities that we all hold, and they're often related to equality.
Excuse me. These numbers reflect the existing population.
Yes.
But if we magnify this, and we look, for example, at the timeline of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Example.
Yeah.
Will this parameter stay the same?
Yeah.
Or there is a big shift?
No, there is an... there's an increase in the number of women professors. But in terms of the progression of black and minority ethnic staff, the reason there is so much concern from government, from our Equality and Human Rights Commission, is that figure has not improved. And we would very much hope it to. We also have a pipeline issue, which is very much in the national press, of black and minority ethnic students of UK origin getting into universities and studying at university. So it's a societal issue which is linked to our economy, to well-being within particular communities in our country as well. Okay, so how are we trying to bring about change? And I should add, that's why we launched our Race Equality Charter mark about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's pretty new. It's been received very well. So how are we promoting change? Apologies to referring to our higher education sector as a donkey, but certainly we are trying to use a range of incentives, whether they be carrots or sticks, to get the sector moving. What we're finding is that we need to use a range of methods. We cannot just speak to one person in a particular way, engage students in the same way. It's not working. So what are we doing? What are our methods? Okay, first, one of the key ones is the business case for equality and diversity. You might have heard me talking about our economy, student retention, and staff experience, as well as student experience. A couple of years ago, we put out a publication sharing stories from 10 vice-chancellors from around the country of how equality and diversity is working for them and their institution. A UK agency for professional development has put out a new publication just 2 days ago about how we need to advocate more the business case. We have banks around the world like HSBC trying to engage in equality and diversity for a number of years. So as a public sector, we're often behind in that thinking. Our law, both nationally and internationally and at EU level, we have a law called the Equality Act, which was introduced in 2010 and brought together previous anti-discrimination laws across the UK. It has a public sector equality duty, and it's within that duty that people are required to publish their gender pay gap information, as well as collect data on the representation of staff and students by different groups, and also to set objectives as to how they're going to improve, promote, and advance equality. The other thing that we're doing is creating an evidence base. The slides that I've just showed you of data, they are from our evidence base. Every year we publish an annual statistical report covering staff and students of the HE sector and where it is at. We have our initiatives like Athena Swan and our Race Equality Charter, and Athena Swan I'm going to talk to you in more detail about. They are designed to be incentives for institutions on the one hand, in terms of to demonstrate how good they are at supporting women and other groups, but they're also designed to stimulate change and to ensure that we can very much get a range of people on board, from academics within departments to senior leadership in the institution. The other thing that we're doing is supporting staff working in higher education, whether that be through HEA fellowships, participation in the Aurora program, which I'm going to be talking about, or providing advice to them on issues that they are experiencing in terms of the promotion of equality and diversity, and how they can do better for their institution. We won't deal with complaints, but very much if they have a concern about a staff member or student or policy or practice in their institution, they will come to us for guidance and advice. We are also involving men as well as women. We'll often find that work to promote equality for women will often focus on women. And what we found over the years is very much the importance of involving men. Men have actually led the way in some areas. Professor Paul Walton at the University of York, who manages their chemistry department, was the first department to get an Athena Swan Gold Award. It was commented on to him, why are you getting involved in this, Paul? Why? And he said, well, I'm married, I have a wife, I have children, I have 2 girls, and I want to ensure that my investment, emotional, financial, in their education, in their well-being, and everything I'm teaching them, the world is their oyster, that they can realize that when they grow up, when they go into the workplace. And in addition to that, the reason as well is that men can very much be allies supporting change. They may be in positions that are more powerful than women in certain areas of university, and through that power they can get people on board and make policy changes. And I have to say, I'm sorry to say this, because I haven't actually seen so many men in a room before often talking about women's equality issues. So thank you all. Okay. So, the Athena Swan Charter, which I know Mary is very keen for me to talk about, and proud to say that Brunel is not only just a member, but an award holder as well for the fantastic work it's doing. What is the Charter? It began in 2005, specifically focusing on science subject, and in recognition that women were significantly underrepresented across the majority of science disciplines in UK higher education, whether that be women students or women staff. Due to demand from the sector and academics in the sector, we expanded the scheme in 2015 to cover all subject areas. The problems in sciences weren't just unique to science. We found that they were across the board in the arts and humanities area. The Athena Swan scheme has been researched now quite a lot, and I'm happy to share more information on the research with you. It was looked at in the context of European programs to advance women through GenderNet, and it was found to be the only scheme that was successful and transferable for advancing women's equality. It's now running globally in Ireland, Australia, and the United States, various forms of it. And we've also have plans to work with Japan, Canada, and India on its introduction. We're seeing more often now that Athena Swan is being linked to funding for research, and that has happened in Ireland. And the National Institute of Health Research also linked Athena Swan to funding. It's not something we have advocated as Advanced HE, formerly ECU. It's actually caused us some problems because it's meant the program snowballed because everyone's panicked that they might not get their research funding. But what it has meant is that it's significantly improving the circumstances in various departments for women, so we're pleased in that sense. And certainly where the programme has been adapted and taken on board, in Ireland, 96.2% of people said that Athena Swan had helped to raise awareness of gender equality issues in Irish higher education. So what is the process that we're asking people to go through? The first stage relates to the head of the institution. I go back to that senior level commitment, senior endorsement to women's equality. And it requires an institution to commit to 10 principles. The first is to acknowledge that academia cannot reach its full potential unless it can benefit from the talents of all. The second one, to advance gender equality, very much relates to addressing the loss of women throughout academia, tackling that leaky pipeline that I highlighted. And that involves work with staff and students and staff who are academics, as well as staff in professional and support roles. So, and the support for staff in professional and support roles is again due to demand, because we had academic women progressing, but staff in professional and support roles were saying, hang on, what about us? We're important to the running of an HEI too. And there were very few programs in place to support them. The third one is to commit to addressing unequal gender representation across academic disciplines, and to recognise those gender differences in particular subject areas for both men and women. And the fourth is to commit to tackling that gender pay gap. Now, we got that in the Athena Swan principles prior to the government requiring publication of information, which is something that we're really proud of because we hope it helped the sector prepare for that gender pay gap reporting. The fifth one is to commit to removing the obstacles faced by women in key major career transitions. Related to that is the preponderance of short-term contracts for academics, but often women will be affected. How can you plan having a family around short-term contracts? So we've had many stories of women who will hold back on having a family because they're worried about when their research grant will come in. And you know, we know that having a family, it's biological. So that's not always possible to plan a family around when research grants come in. But why should women be doing that as well? So we're trying to move away from a culture of short-term contracts in the sector. The other one relates to the discrimination against trans people, and by that I mean transsexual people, like the case of Hussein Zabi, as was recognised in Bahrain. And then a commitment at the senior level to demonstrate strong commitment, as well as then moving on to making structural and cultural changes. So what do we mean by structures and cultures? I mean about, you know, the times that meetings are held, the availability of even car parking for women can come up often. You know, how can you drop your children off and then go to your place of work if you need to drive when there isn't a car parking space available to you? Looking at childcare provision and support, whether that be childcare vouchers to help with the costs of childcare, or whether that be having an on-site university creche, but also looking at what we require of women in particular subject areas. So when we require a maths or physics A-level as a minimum to undertake a science subject, and yet we don't have enough women undertaking physics and A-level maths, how can we make that a requirement? They're not able to undertake those subjects, so some universities have introduced some really interesting initiatives around that. And then finally, to consider intersectionality, as you've highlighted, you know, looking at women from a range of backgrounds and understanding their experiences. Okay, the second element of the Athena Swan progress involves reflecting on those principles, looking at how, as an individual institution, so it's specific to an individual institution and its circumstances and its context, not the national level, because each institution, as we know, is very different. To draw on the materials that we provide a handbook, we provide support, we also provide an application form that needs to be used to conduct a robust self-assessment process. And then an institution can apply for a bronze award. And that self-assessment process involves the formation of a self-assessment team, which can have, and we encourage it to have, student representation, staff representation, both academic and professional support, as well as men and women at various points of their career, ideally with senior level leadership. We've got a long wish list for things that we would like to see. And that self-assessment process needs to identify the key issues specific to that institution. It might be depending on its subject specialisms. It might be due to the area in which it is located in the UK, or in Australia, or the US, or Canada now. And we have different levels of award that institutions could apply for, silver and gold, after bronze. And those will depend on whether there has actually been demonstrable impact from previous activities, as well as whether or not they are a beacon in the case of gold. once the submission has been made, we convene panels. There is a process every 2 years for panels. In the UK, we have about 50 panels per round of submission, who are formed to assess whether or not the submission is at specific standard or not. And that will comprise of academics, equality and human resources specialists, as well as subject area specialisms. We recognise that depending on a subject area, there might be differences, because once an institution has its institutional level award, its departments can then go on to get an award. And we recognise that there's a combination of top-down at the institutional level and bottom-up at the departmental level, bringing about sustainable and overarching organisational change. Okay, and these are just the processes that we'll go through to ensure in a panel that there aren't conflicts of interests, to ensure consistency in decision-making, and also that there's a right to appeal if people are not happy with that decision. And I can assure you that often people are not happy with the decision. We do take away awards as well as not give them. Okay. So yeah, this is just building on the slide, because once an institution has an award, it cannot sit on its laurels at all. First of all, it might want to look at its departments to see if they would like an award, and particularly where there's a link to research funding, that might be necessary. But secondly, rewards are for 4 years only. And during that time, to get a renewal, they'll need to demonstrate that they have actually worked towards that award and the actions that they committed to get the award. Okay. So I'm going to skip this slide. That's just how many awards there are. This is UK only, it's not international. We'll be developing an international slide at the moment, but 731 awards across the UK. And what we understand is that women, when they're looking for a career change, will look first to see if an institution has an Athena Swan award over other career benefits like length of leave, whether or not there's childcare, and that's because those factors are often likely to have been considered in an award. Okay, so it requires an individual approach of critical analysis. I've mentioned critically analysing the sector as ourselves to see what the issues are, but for an institution to also critically analyse its data, to identify reasons for exclusion, and also look at impact and action over that 4-year period. It's certainly not box ticking. It's not looking at hiring or promoting women because they are underrepresented. It's looking at hiring and promoting women because they have skills, expertise, etc. to deliver within that institution, and looking at the barriers that they might experience to sharing those skills and experience with students, fellow colleagues, and so forth. Okay. It's also not a deficit model, as in we are going to look at the women as the issue and to try to fix those women. It's about looking at the barriers women might face in an employment context. Okay. So, the award criterias, bronze, silver and gold, I've mentioned. So at bronze level, people are required to undertake a thorough self-analysis, to identify key issues and to commit to actions. So there will be institutions of varying levels on a bronze award. And when I say levels, I mean they'll be at a different point in their journey of promoting gender equality and equal opportunities. They aren't all necessarily comparable, but they will all have undertaken their self-analysis, identified key issues, and committed to actions. Silver level, you would need to demonstrate actual activity based on your previous actions. So an action might be, for example, to improve promotions, and a university could report, well, all staff have now undertaken a workshop on promotions. That's fantastic. That's bronze level. For it to be silver, we would like to see that as a result of those workshops, more women have been promoted. more people understand, you know, how they can make their promotions process more friendly towards women. Whether that be ensuring that women are aware of a promotions process in a university. Not everyone is aware of promotions processes, you'd be surprised. You might need to look at sort of specific promotion workshops to ensure that people know when they're ready to go, when to take that leap. And also understanding the promotions process, what to expect, how it works. And some of these initiatives we're finding are now being transferred to all staff across an institution, so early career researchers often in particular. And that at gold level, you would need to demonstrate sustained impact, ongoing impact, and what a beacon of achievement. So Professor Paul Walton, who I mentioned, he'll go around the country sharing his experiences of being a gold department and why and what it was like. We've been evaluating, Swan over the years. I seem to have missed a slide, sorry, which probably isn't such a bad case. I'll just stay on that one. No, sorry, it's not actually, it's me. Apologies. So examples, so what we've seen over the years is progressive change. In 2006, we started to see sort of examples of, well, we will induct staff, we will inform staff on induction about our initiatives on gender. Yes, sorry. I haven't got that data specifically with me, but the majority are bronze. We have about 8 silver institutions. To get a silver institutional level award, you need to have at least 8 departments. We haven't yet got a gold institution in the UK, but we have gold departments.
Maybe because they started in 2005 and it will take time.
Yeah, it's because the system recognises that it takes time to build. We're talking about cultural change. We're not talking about just a change in policy, because you can change policy and it doesn't always make a difference unless there is cultural change supporting it.
But the idea of impact is very important.
Yeah.
Impact is sustainable.
Yeah. And that's what we're really trying to embed, is sustainability of change and ensuring that there is clear impact. So thank you. Yeah. So we've seen a lot of change over the years. So it started off with induction processes specifically for women, letting them know about the family-friendly policies that there are within a university, be that, as I've mentioned, childcare, vouchers, family-related leave, meetings scheduled at particular times and work hours. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'll try and rush through. We're then, 2017, we've seen people looking at funds to bridge contracts for staff on maternity leave. Previously, your research grant ended whether or not you were on maternity leave, even if you hadn't completed your research. Changing modes of student assessment. I've already mentioned changing criteria for getting a place on a course, but also how are we assessing students? How do men do better, or women in particular methods of assessment? Now what we're looking at today from the last round was actually paying people's childcare costs whilst they go on a conference, providing creches at conferences, looking at gender-balanced reading lists on courses to ensure that women students feel represented, looking at metrics as well of how people are cited in research, diversity in interviews, posts all advertised as flexible. So you can take on a post, do it 3 days a week, do it 2 days a week, do it 5 days a week. Do what works for you. Do that 5-day-a-week post in 4. And getting all candidates to show commitment to equality and diversity. So it's not just senior management anymore, it's all staff. Not expecting staff to look at emails outside of core hours, and mapping the diverse careers of career progression as well. Okay, I'm going to miss... If you're interested in Athena Swan Impact, just let me know and I can point you in a direction. I'm also happy to share these slides. The final one I wanted to touch on was, We are having some challenges with Swan in that it's grown so much. We're now at a stage we need to review it. We try and review our programs every 3 years to ensure that they're reflective of current best practice and that they're as user-friendly as possible to the sector, and that is why we're undertaking a current review. So Aurora is the second program I wanted to highlight. This was a program that has been running over a number of years now. We've had 4,613 women in the UK go through Aurora, with 171 institutions participating in the program. It's an initiative to bring together leadership experts and higher education institutions to take positive action together. Aurora, by the way, is, we like Roman mythology, it's another goddess, and Aurora is the goddess of dawn who renews herself every morning. And it's very much looking at the individual within a network. So what is that network? We run Aurora, but we run it in partnership with universities and individual staff at their institution. And for it to be successful, an institution needs to support the staff that it sends on the program. The program involves an action learning day and 4 sessions on, I'll talk more about the sessions, but with hearing from role models in the sector who are high achieving women leaders. And it's aimed at women who are up to senior lecturer level or professional services equivalent, so it's for a range of staff in the sector. Okay. So the Aurora program works with women to support them in identifying who they are, what they can offer as leaders, and how HE in general and their HEI in particular works to support within existing power and politics structures. We're continually recognizing that women don't often understand the structures that they're working in. It applies to men as well, but how can we be more transparent in how we operate as institutions? And looking at basic leadership skills as well as adaptive skills. These are just some of the voices of testimony. I'll share the slides after, but we have undertaken a longitudinal study to find out what works, and 17% of women who undertook Aurora were promoted in comparison with 18% of respondents who didn't undertake Aurora, so there's success. And a third felt more adept at turning organizational systems to their advantage. Okay. With 60% feeling more comfortable in positions of authority. And this is some of the things that Aurorians are doing. They're seeking out challenge. They're happy to tell others what they need to do in order to succeed and reward. They're inspiring others, challenging organizational culture, mentoring others, and seeing innovative solutions to problems. And they're also comfortable with power. But what are the challenges that we have identified? The key ones are lack of career development and progression opportunities, flexible working patterns, I've already mentioned, ability to work flexibly, not just 5 days a week, and confidence about their own abilities as well as gendered attitudes. Again, what's stereotypically seen as what men and what women do in our society. So these are some of the to-do lists for institutions that we've got. More training, introduce women's support groups and networks. It's wonderful here in Bahrain you've got your equal opportunities committees running in a number of organizations. Reviewing job descriptions to see if some can be full-time, part-time rather than full-time. And can they be offered on a job share or flexible basis? And ensuring that women don't just go beyond doing their job quietly, but do their job loudly, shout out about their achievements. Men are more likely to shout out about their achievements as well as negotiate pay. That's what our research has found. I just want to mention, I'm finishing now, Aurora Internationally. We're really proud of this. We've launched it in March of this year. It's actually was run in the Gulf states with 7 participants from across 5 countries. We're involving men and women in this program. So it's different to Aurora, which is a women's only program. Aurora International is for men and women who are change makers within their institutions looking to make systemic change. And I will finish on that note. I understand there's time for questions after, but I'll leave that slide up whilst I leave the stage if you're interested in that initiative. And do please ask any questions that you have. I'm more than happy to speak with people. Okay.